We've taken it so much further with this game.
There is war everywhere. You're not fighting on one planet, you're fighting on many planets.
That's huge even for Total War scale.
Welcome to Total War Warhammer 40,000 Developer Roundtable. I'm Nastya, Senior Community Manager on Total War.
And I'm Josh, Head of Player Engagement on Total War.
Today, we are joined by some of our development team to give you the very first glimpse into what Total War Warhammer 40,000 will bring.
Exactly. You've seen the trailer by now, and today we're going to be here giving you the broad strokes of what you can expect from our next title. So before we begin, let's get some introductions out of the way. Dave, care to kick us off?
Hello, I'm Dave Petrie. I'm the product owner for Battles on Total War, and I'm going to try and spend this interview not hogging all the time talking about orcs.
Hi, I'm Ian Roxburgh. I'm the Principal Creative Director.
Hi, I'm Simon Mann. I'm a lead designer, primarily focused on the campaign gameplay.
So this game has been something our fans have been waiting for a long time. So how does it feel to finally reveal it?
Oh, it's been brilliant. We've been working on the game for such a while. To finally be able to come out and talk about it with our fans is really great. There's so much enthusiasm for this setting within the team. You just walk around the office and everyone's painting minis and creating armies and playing the game. And it's such a great atmosphere and so much excitement and passion for this setting. It's really nice to be able to actually talk about it openly for the first time.
So when you sat down with that massive list of every possible future Total War title, what was it that encouraged you to settle on Total War Warhammer 40,000 as our next adventure?
Well, a number of things, really. I mean, first of all, this setting is just made for a Total War game. And having done the fantasy trilogy with Games Workshop, we've formed a really good relationship with them over the years. And just that passion and the idea that we wanted to bring Total War to the stars, everything just aligned, and it's pretty much a no-brainer. This is just the perfect project to do next. So, yeah, and we're really excited about it.
The setting is unlike anything we did before and explored before. So what was the vision that was guiding your design approach?
Right at the very top level, there is no peace amongst the stars, and that's the guiding principle for everything we do. There's only war in this game. It's like there's the scars of previous wars for thousands of years. There's ongoing war wherever you go. It's all around you, and you'll leave scars of the wars you're engaged in for future generations. So it's all about that. But it's also about how you engage with the game and how your faction, the choices you make, the decisions you make, even the kind of units you fight and how they fight. You can design them. There's a level of customization in the game where you can define the way you fight your war, the way you choose to, and the way you define your stories and how that internal narrative develops throughout your experience with the game.
Well, you've just touched on them there, but the factions. So this is a setting with a massive, rich, diverse cast of factions and characters and settings. How did you go about settling on Space Marines, Astra Militarum, Orcs, and Eldari as our starting races?
So I think one thing we wanted to do was seize the opportunity to make some really cool asymmetric factions. I think the Warhammer 40,000, certainly the tabletop and the universe itself, offer us a lot of opportunities to bring asymmetry between these factions. They're all very different, right? If you look around this room and all the different kind of 4 factions you see around you, they're all going to play and feel very different to one another. That obviously meant we couldn't do all of them at once, right? We had to pick just a limited number because we really wanted to put the effort in to make each one very special. We decided to start with the Space Marines. For us, we think they're kind of one of the most important factions for our telling of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. They are this elite troops. They are the kind of scions of the Emperor. Their goal is to defend humanity, protect it from threats both within and without. But they're very limited, right? There's not lots of them. So when you're playing as them, you're not fielding tens of thousands of troops, right? You're fielding maybe kind of 100, 200 troops. But each one of those is worth 100 of any enemy. So they're really fun to play. And you're not controlling lots of units. So there's this kind of gameplay that feeds into that. We also really wanted to bring a faction that feels very Total War. we decided to go with the Astra Militarum because they are billions of men and women. Once again, they're all kind of part of the Imperium of Man. They're trying to defend humanity from the Xenos threats. But there are lots of them, right? Like, they are massed forces, regiments, there is artillery, there is front lines. It's something you'd see as a very military faction, right? Even down to their industrial complex, where they're building industry on planets and developing them in order to kind of fuel the machine and fund the development of more like tanks and infantry. So they kind of come in as a really nice kind of contrast to that, and a faction that I think a lot of more traditional Total War players will really vibe with, because it's got a lot of that kind of heraldry to it, as it were. I think the next faction that we chose to do was the Orcs. The Orcs are a really big part of the universe, but they're the enemy, right? We needed someone for the kind of Imperium to be battling against. And the Orcs, they are a massed green tide of kind of chaos and energy that's charging across a battlefield, armed with metal sticks and axes and whatever they can jerry-rig together. Rocket launchers on sticks, but also like vehicles, right, which they've repurposed from Imperial scrap. Right, they're literally deconstructing the Imperium to build their own kind of war machines, as it were. And they offer this kind of beautiful energy to the more kind of military regimented side that you get with the Imperium. Lastly, we chose to do the Eldari. We really wanted to kind of push the boat out a little bit and sort of really push what it means to be a faction within a Total War game, right? Like, they play totally differently to anything I think we've ever done in the past, right? I don't think we've done anything quite like this. They aren't a faction which is built for kind of massed combat, right? Like, it's not big armies fighting one another. Every loss to the Eldari doesn't get returned, right? Their souls are being taken away by the Chaos Gods. Like, they are literally kind of fighting to death to try and protect the universe and the galaxy itself. So you're not fighting, once again, as say in this kind of frontline style aspects. You're using the webways and you're using your kind of stealth and your advanced technology, right, which none of the other factions have available to them, to actually kind of achieve your goals, right? And your goals aren't always just conquest, right? Your goals may actually be just kind of don't allow this awful thing to happen. Stop this calamity that could be occurring to the galaxy. Like, everyone else is still trying to kill you while you're trying to do that, but you know what your mission is and what you need to achieve, and you approach it with kind of grim determination.
So how did that affect the design approach?
So I think the main thing is when we took the kind of Space Marines, right? As I say, I think for us they're a really important faction for what kind of we want to tell in our story of this universe. They're not like a traditional Total War faction in a lot of ways. They are a very limited force. So it's going to be a really fun gameplay style of, you are these kind of superhuman troops, but I guess your kind of weakness is you're limited in number, right? Like, you can take on any foe on those battlefields, but you've also got to make sure you're kind of measuring your losses, right? Because you're not building infrastructure, right? You're not kind of able to build new constructions in the same way as maybe the other factions. So you are really reliant on these troops that you've brought in to fight the battle, but it's also really fun to fight the battle as them.
And what about Astra Militarum? They are quite different.
They are. They're a lot more of a traditional, I like to call it a Total War faction, massed ranks of infantry lines and artillery. If you want that more Total War experience when you play this game, I'd pick up the Astra Militarum. They're definitely hitting that right on their head.
How is it that they're emulating that traditional Total War experience?
Well, as I said, it's more about building up resources, supply, building infrastructure to recruit an army in what you would expect most Total War games to have as a core. With some of the other factions, we're moving away from that and trying very asymmetrical ideas that you progress through the game in slightly different ways. Whereas with the Astra Militarum, they are the humans throughout the galaxy. Right? So, it's more grounded in what we would say Total War has been as a staple for so many years. So, to me, that's my meat and drink.
And what about Eldari and Orcs?
The Eldari have been really interesting for us, right? Like, as I said, I think sometimes a faction comes along and they're so unique that you kind of have to do them justice, right? Like, they are a dying race due to a kind of major cataclysm that has occurred to them many, many kind of eons ago. So they are kind of trying to prevent these cataclysms occurring, kind of more tragedy that could befall kind of humanity or any other race in the galaxy. They're not a faction that will fight toe-to-toe. You're utilizing your webway gates as a kind of traversal mechanism to move quickly from place to place, including moving to your craft world, a kind of off-map setup piece, which is actually where you're recruiting all your units. And you're setting up your various shrines, which allow you to access your more elite troops going through. So there's this really interesting gameplay here that, once again, a bit like the Space Marines, you're quite limited in number. Your troops are not a kind of infinite resource that you can use. You're actually kind of having to, once again, use them carefully because they're all a glass cannon. Every soul lost is a soul not returned, right? So you have to really pick your fights and kind of challenge your enemies.
And then there are orcs. And then there are orcs.
God, Dave, do it.
They're much less about that sort of like weird, sneaky stuff like hiding. They're much more upfront about building up a huge mass of boys and basically smashing through the solar system, through the galaxy in a big, terrible war, right? When that comes to the campaign, there are actually some sort of parallels with the Astra Militarum, for example, in that there are loads of them. They are building up resources, but they are much, much more about building up momentum and continuing to fight and continuing to It's crumping with the lads. You know, it's continuing to fight and continuing to push forwards a front line and making sure that the boys don't get bored and start fighting each other, right? It's about taking him and his lads and basically smashing along and keeping that momentum up and making sure you've always got something interesting to sink a chopper into.
Dave likes the orcs.
I love orcs.
Yeah.
Won't be able to tell.
You've grown the scale for what we're fighting for from provinces to planets. How are you going to capture both the small details of planetary warfare and obviously the wider conflict?
So it kind of starts with you're fighting on a planet, right? You're fighting in a battle, a kind of real-time experience. You've got thousands of troops kind of charging across the surface of a hive world, right? Kind of fighting in the streets of a hive city, firing powerful bombardments kind of at one another, either from orbit or from off field, right? And you're kind of fighting to take that hive city, maybe back for the Imperium in some manner. Zooming out a bit further than that, that was a battle on a planet, right? So once you complete that battle, you're now on the planet. You captured the region. Well done. The hive city, it's now yours. Because you've taken that hive city, you now have access to further resources and large populations of it, like billions of people are living in these hive cities. That affects your kind of campaign across that planet, right? Because you've captured that hive city, you've now got a staging point to advance across the other regions of the planet, each of which themselves would be a different kind of battle type. Kind of zooming up further to that, you then have your kind of fleets around the planet, right? Like your fleets are able to drop forces to where they need to be into kind of certain key regions. They're able to support with, as say, off-map bombardments, both in campaign and in battle. But then they're also able to kind of just ferry your troops. They are transport as well as that. And obviously, that's because you're not fighting on one planet. You're fighting on many planets as you go. You're traveling your forces kind of to many different front lines, many different battlefields, trying to take control of this overall planetary system. So your fleets are kind of your key motivator for that. And obviously, it's not just traveling planet to planet, right? Like there are anomalies, there are things to do in the space between as well. So there's a strategy layer that you're kind of having to interact with. We didn't stop there. Like, even better than that, like we are now offering you kind of a further context, right? Like, much like campaigns give a context to your battle, right? Capturing that hive city changed the way that you play. We are now saying that actually your campaign matters. The result of this campaign will change the kind of future of the galaxy itself, because we've moved up to this other layer where you're fighting in what we call a crusade theatre, which is a kind of area of the galaxy which is seen as a kind of hot point for conflict with factions fighting one another. And in these key areas, you are fighting in systems. You're also sometimes just fighting pivotal battles as well. And that's the idea behind it, is you now have a context for it. It's not just a campaign and it's a one and done thing and you had great fun and it's over. It's a campaign, you had great fun, look what it's done to your next steps. What campaigns trigger from that? What battles come from it? How do you advance your faction after that? So when you go into the next campaign, maybe you are more prepared or even more powerful than you were previously.
So the scars of your campaigns and your battles, they're all going to be shown on that crusade theatre level. But what's the worst thing you could do to a planet?
You can destroy planets entirely. So
pretty bad.
It's pretty
bad.
Yeah.
Unlike previous games as well, we obviously have let you raise cities, but there was always an opportunity to rebuild. But in the world of kind of Total War Warhammer 40,000, we are actually letting you just blow up and destroy a planet. It is a permanent action. There's no backseas, there's no takebacks. But also remember, it's not something that can be done frivolously, right? Like blowing up a planet by the Imperium is something requiring multiple layers of authorization. They would much rather throw away 1 billion human souls to reclaim a world than destroy it. However, there are extreme circumstances, and we do let you push the button.
Fantastic. Well, assuming we have anywhere to fight, I have a very big question for you. There's been a lot of speculation about it. You know, it's such an integral part of Total War, and fans have gone back and forth on how we do it, how we wouldn't do it. Battles. How did you approach designing battles in Total War Warhammer 40,000?
Oh, there we go. That is a massive question, and I think with anything of this scale, like the first thing that you do is you go to the source material, right? You go straight into the codexes and you go into the tabletop and you play it and you really feel it and you get to know all of the factions, all the potential factions and the different, you know, combinations of things that can happen. You look at all the toys and the fun stuff that you can do there, and then you start to think, well, how can we sort of transpose that to Total War, right? And obviously scale is a big thing for us. So we thought, well, we need to make sure we have ways to bring in all sorts of stuff, make sure that you can, you know, keep to sort of supplying the battlefield with your powerful units. So something that came as a real sort of natural occurrence was we have to have reinforcement play a really big part in what battles are. Again, not only for the scale, but also to create that sort of intrinsic link between the campaign. So now when we're playing, for example, Space Marines, who you've got sat on your fleet really, really matters, right? Because those are the people that are going to be able to come in via drop pod. They're going to be able to slam into the battlefield. We're going to talk about destruction. They can knock down buildings, right? They can destroy elements of the battlefield, change the battlefield, and they can start killing things where you need them to be, right? So the Space Marines can become all about that sort of like, Swiss Army knife approach to battle, right?
And this is a fundamental part of the tabletop game.
Absolutely.
All the factions, it's those reinforcements are a key part of that flavour, and it has to be therefore part of the Total War experience of it.
Absolutely. So when you've got your units that you have specific roles for, they can sometimes now show up where you need them to if you sort of sequester them away in the right places. You know, and we have different methods for each faction. Some are much more traditional. You know, the Guard have less ways of interjecting directly into the battlefield. They might have to throw wave after wave of their own men up the battlefield in order to, you know, arrive in time to make sure that they get there before the last unit that is probably now flagging might be running away. So to replace them in time to keep them hold that line. You have the Orcs in a similar fashion. They do have some incredible teleportation technology. You wouldn't believe it, but they do. So they can really zap things into the battlefield and do some pretty wild things there too. And then, of course, you have the Eldari with their webway gates and things like that. So the ability to sort of pop up in unexpected places. All of these methods allow you to bring your toys to the table where you need them, right? And that was a really, really big part of making sure we captured this and sort of evolved the gameplay. I think a lot of people look at this setting and they kind of go, wow, that's really futuristic. And they're right, it feels very futuristic. But a core realization that we had was that it's not a realization we only had, this is it. It is science fantasy, right? So there is so much fantasy wrapped into it. And when you think about the conflicts that go on, yes, there is cover. Yes, there's a lot of ranged combat going on, but there's also like loads of punching, like so much punching, like loads and loads of crumping that goes on. Like you really have a lot of melee going on in these battles. There are lots of forces will sort of mass up and crash into one another. Practically every unit has some sort of combination of a thing that they can shoot you with and a thing that they can punch you with, right? Like in some cases, literally power fists, right? So there are like so many sort of very sort of familiar elements actually to it when you start to see and realize that there's a lot of sort of like fantasy drives in there, you know, and so those massed armies still happen. There will be massive front lines crashing against one another. So yeah, there's loads of gutsy
it's really
stuff.
like the reinforcement mechanics, the way you fight, even within a faction. It's so much more connected to that campaign experience and how you've teed up that particular setup for the battle, and that's key. And it's fundamental to the core design as well. But also going back to, understanding that setting and the Warhammer 40,000 universe to that degree, it really brings out that in the game itself as well. So having a team that's just so ingrained in this for so many years, like Dave, and it really helps bring out those detail that it makes it authentic, and that's just such a fundamental Total War franchise pillar is authenticity, and you can just see it coming out in this game in all the details as well as the bigger picture. So I think that's key to what we need to do to bring that out in the game.
And again, on that connection level, we really want to make sure that we capture again the scale of these conflicts. So when we're fighting these battles, they're they're not just like one battle happening in an isolated pocket. You are the flashpoint. You are the most important force fighting in the most important place that will decide the event on effectively that continent, right? But there is war everywhere, all across the planet's surface, right? So you really are that flashpoint. When you show up to battles, you often will have a purpose. There are things that you are trying to achieve. It might be like, securing an orbital cannon, for example, to stop people from using it. But also you'll be joining and fighting against forces that are already present on the battlefield. It is not uncommon that you'll rock up as Space Marines and find that there are a bunch of Astra Militarum about to be overwhelmed by a bunch of sneaky Eldari. Or it might be that you show up as orcs and find that there's loads of really great Astra Militarum to beat the hell out of, right? So it's that kind of level of trying to, again, capture that scale, make sure we really are doing justice to this sheer volume of stuff and different units that are going to show up in this game.
So we've spoken a lot about Total War Warhammer 40,000, but what is it that really the Total War's bringing here? What is it that our game is doing differently to other games in the 40,000 universe?
Well, okay, I think the main thing here for us is scale. It's a fundamental Total War franchise pillar, for starters, but we've taken it so much further with this game. I mean, you literally hear the stuff Dave's talking about. You've got units and single entities on a battlefield, down there on the ground, and right from there, and the scale of the battles up to the scale of a region of a planet, to multiple planets in a system, to multiple systems across an entire galaxy. And that's huge even for Total War scale. And it's like we are over the next years going to develop this out, and all the content and everything that fills up that galaxy. But the gameplay and the decisions you make and the way you interact with the game is literally right from down there all the way across the galaxy.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I think the kind of personalization of your kind of faction, its units, its style, it's even down to its mechanics, right? You're creating your faction, right? You're making something unique and personal to you, obviously attached to, hopefully, but I think that adds so much to us. Like I haven't seen anyone else really kind of going to quite the depths that we do. Like you can have different pattern types, you can have kind of different left and right color, you can set your pauldron, or like kind of your knee. Sorry, pauldron's up there. You can set your kneecap to a different color. You can have different decals around your faction. If you want to be a kind of like a, kind of an Ultramarines fanboy and have kind of like the sigil of Ultramar everywhere, you can do that. It's really fun, and we've generally found anyone who's playing it spends a lot of time on that bit, right? Because you really want to make your own faction and feel that. And it honestly is great. It really, really takes me back a long way.
Finally, of everything we spoke about today, what are you the most excited about for our players to experience?
I think for me it is the customization. I know I've literally just mentioned it, but it keeps coming back as this thing, right? Like everything comes back to this fact that I think for the first time I've made my faction, right? Like they're uniquely mine. No one else will have a faction anything like mine, right? Okay, yeah, there'll still be Space Marines, but they're my chapter, right? Like this is my Force Commander who I've kind of personalized. Like I'm controlling all that. If I want to have a Space Marine faction that's more about kind of fire mechanics, like I want flamethrowers and melters everywhere, I can make that. I can make a faction that's leaning into that. And that is my kind of way of playing, right? Because I love fire. Fire is great, normally. But that's the thing, is we're kind of letting you make your own kind of gameplay, essentially, right? Like, here are the problems, here are the challenges that the universe is throwing at you by battles and campaigns and flashpoints, but how do you solve that? How do you build the kind of ultimate faction to kind of deal with any problem that could be thrown at you? I think it's going to give so many kind of hours, maybe even years, hopefully, of like entertainment, of just making cool factions, hopefully sharing it with your friends and stuff like that as well, right? Like, and always comparing your kind of faction designs with one another. I'm really excited by that.
Well, all of that as well. But for me as well, it's something that's very different now with Total War, the Crusade Theatre concept, where, we know how long a campaign can go on, how engaged you can be for hundreds of hours. I've done it myself for years, right? And then you go, great, that was a campaign. I invested so much time and effort. Now I'll start. It's very replayable. I'll start another one as a different faction. Great. But now you play that campaign, and that's another part of that jigsaw of your own internal narrative feeding onto a higher layer that moves gradually across the whole sector and then the whole galaxy. To me, it's that whole campaign experience just being a part of your journey, not the whole journey. And to me, that's so fundamentally new, and it just means it's just such a long-term experience beyond even our massive long campaigns for previous years. So that's the bit for me that stands out, I think. Dave?
It's kind
Orcs,
of
maybe?
probably something to do with orcs.
Maybe.
Maybe something to do with explosives.
Probably.
I think it's sort of like a litany of firsts, right? It's like, again, talking about the lance strike. It's the first time that you drag a lance strike across the battlefield, and the second time, and the third time when you use it to obliterate buildings, to drag across units. That sort of satisfaction is so super tangible. It's the first time you shoot a tank, right, and you see it veer off and hit a building, and again cause a bit more destruction, cause a bit more chaos. It's the first time that you use like a psyker's ability, right, and sort of blast apart an opponent, or see orcs teleporting in from somewhere unexpected. A weird boy going pew and jumping a bunch of boys right up in your face, or vice versa, right? And there's all those moments are in there, and I think there's so much love and care for the source material in there, and I think there's a lot of little bits that people find and kind of go, wow, this is there's some good stuff here.
And that concludes Total War Warhammer 40,000 Developer Roundtable. Big thank you to our developers, our guests today. And then we're going to be back later in 2026, and we will bring you more content. We're going to bring you battles. We're going to bring you campaign. And that's not all. We're going to go into deep dives. We're going to do blogs, videos, and all sorts of Q&As. So we will see you there.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for tuning in, and another massive thank you from everyone here at the Total War Warhammer 40,000 team. We'll see you next time.